Joining us, Kevin Schofield, himself a former High Court judge, of course, before he became political editor at HuffPost UK.
Before I went up in the world.
Before you went up in the world, yeah, indeed. Judges or journalists, you know. Interesting. Yeah, I can't see you in a week, to be honest, Kev.
Well, actually, you say that, but...
If you pulled something off then, that would be extraordinary. Wow, way to go. You've just hot-footed it from Parliament, of course. How was PMQs?
Yeah, it was okay.
Back to normal, by the way, after a few weeks.
Absolutely, yeah. It was Starmer versus Badenoch again. I thought the main takeaway in terms of looking to the future was Keir Starmer was very careful not to rule out freezing income tax thresholds, continuing the freeze on income tax thresholds, which would be a massive U-turn, another big U-turn, because in the budget last year, Rachel Reeves said that she was going to lift them again in 2028-29 in time for the next election. So basically, it's called fiscal drag, and we've probably discussed this before. It basically means that if you get a pay rise and the threshold stays the same, whereas before it we got with inflation, which tended to make sure that people weren't trapped in a higher tax band. If you freeze it, more people suddenly have to end up paying more tax, and it's a sneaky way for the government to raise several £billion. You know, it's a very
Can
easy...
they get away with that without saying they raise tax?
Well, again, it's one of those ones that the practical impact is that it does raise someone's tax. If suddenly you go from being a 20% tax rate payer to a 40%, then your tax is going to go up. And you've done nothing other than get a pay rise. So, but they would say, well, the rate of tax, the bands haven't gone up, but it's a stealth tax effectively. And it was brought in by the Conservatives, and they froze it. And as I say, last year Rachel Reeves said, we stay frozen as the Tories plan until 28-29, but after that it will go back to going up with inflation, which is what used to happen. But today he was asked quite clearly by Kemi Badenoch, will you end the freeze and the thresholds, and he wouldn't say he would. Whereas he did say that they wouldn't raise income tax, VAT or national insurance, which was in Labour's manifesto. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, because that would be a way of kind of achieving maybe not all of the money, but you get a good chunk of it.
You get a good chunk of it back.
And you could still say, I haven't raised income tax.
Exactly.
Even though you kind of have.
Absolutely have. Well, if you're one of the people who suddenly goes into a higher tax band...
Yeah, I've got a pay rise. How much is it worth? Oh, hang on, nothing.
I've actually lost money. So, you know, it's one of the vagaries of the tax system. And the other thing that Kemi Badenoch asked was about the wealth tax again. There's an awful lot of talk about the wealth tax, whether they're going to bring one in, and he wouldn't rule that out either. Now, I'd still be very surprised if they did it, but the fact that he didn't rule it out, again, just sets that hair running again. But for some reason, Kemi Badenoch, she had another question after it, and she didn't pursue it. So she just kind of left that one.
See, that seems to be a fault of the Conservatives at the moment, and of Badenoch in particular, because to not pursue it, to be that kind of, you know, dog with a bone, that's what you kind of need. I know you can simultaneously waste 6 questions on one thing where it didn't need that. But also, if you're onto something, stick with it, surely.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the reason why Starmer never appears to be in any great difficulty with her. You know, maybe if she did press home the point a little bit more, really try to drill down into the detail, ask him again and again, then he might seem a little bit discomfited. But again, there was no knockout blow. I feel like I say that every week, but there wasn't.
And there needs to be, at this stage of her tenure as the boss of the Tories, she should be knocking. And there's a bit of an open goal there as well. So, you know, knockout blows should be coming by the second almost. Yeah,
he's not a popular Prime Minister. He's not got much of a record to defend. There's an awful lot of U-turns that you can criticise him on. But yeah, she doesn't seem to land any blows.
And then Farage stands up and the place goes very quiet because people want to hear his question.
Well, if only. I mean, the thing is, I think it's so counterproductive for Labour MPs to be heckling him and shouting him, because, you know, Nigel Farage presents himself as the anti-establishment figure who tells it like it is, whether the establishment likes it or not. So if by merely standing up and opening his mouth, suddenly he's heckled, and it was really loud today, really loud.
Just proves his point.
It proves his point, absolutely. See, there, I'm trying to tell it like it is, and these people are shouting me down because they don't like what I've got to say. And I think that works in his favour, and I just don't understand why the Labour whips don't have a word with their MPs and say, look, Farage is asking a question today, shut your mouths.
Every time you boo and jeer him, his
his
popularity goes up.
Goes up, absolutely. You're just playing into his hands.
You'd think they would know that.
They do it every single time.
When he did get a question out, immigration, I'm assuming, was the theme.
Yeah, so he tied it in with the Macron visit, basically saying, you've got to stand up to this, I think he called him anti-Brexit, didn't say pompous, like arrogant maybe, French president. Clearly no love lost there.
Yeah.
There's a slight personal element to this, of course, remember, because Macron hasn't met with Farage while he's here.
Yeah.
He has met with the Prime Minister, obviously, Kemi Badenoch, but also Ed Davey. And Reform weren't very happy that he wasn't going to meet
but that's
Nigel
normal,
Farage as well.
I mean,
he can't meet everyone.
No.
And he had, although they're ahead in the polls, they do only have, I almost said 5 MPs. It's back to 4 again.
That's
so
true.
they are a small party. As far as I'm aware, he wasn't meeting anyone from the SNP, who have many more MPs than Reform. So, as I say, there's a personal element there. And he was basically saying to Starmer, hang tough, don't be fobbed off by the French. You know, they've got to basically play their part in trying to stop the small boats as well.
Let's move to the big story here, which is, I mean, I don't know how political parties are going to divvy this up in terms of their own positions, but these court reforms, fewer jury trials recommended to prevent essentially a total collapse of the system.
Yeah.
Brian Levison, in charge of this, wants to reduce the 76,957 case Crown Court backlog, reserving juries for the more serious cases. Now, as I said at the beginning, this isn't being arrived on because they found a better way of doing justice. This has happened because they've got to get an 77,000 backlog down. Yeah,
basically, and it's kind of classic British system, is that we wait until something is about to break before we actually think about trying to fix it. This is something, obviously, that hasn't just happened overnight. This has been building up for a very long
100%.
time. And they're only now finally getting around to trying to fix it. But in doing so, it's, attacking really one of the fundamental aspects of the justice system and freedom of personal freedom in a way, because surely you are entitled, if you're charged with a serious offence, you should be entitled to being tried in front of a jury of your peers. And then once you start picking away at these freedoms and these rights that people have, it's very difficult to give them back.
I remember talking to somebody years ago as a guest on the show who was saying that there was some kind of fraud trial, and it went on for about 9 months, and it was so complicated that the lawyers were struggling to keep up with it. It was like they all pretty much did a PhD in international economics to try and get to this, and the tax rules and the bits of VAT from one region to it was ridiculous. And this guy was saying, there's no way a jury should have sat and listened to that, because there's no way you can authentically and reliably arrive at a verdict. Now, I understand that, but that's a different argument to this. That's about different. Certain cases may just be, it's probably just futile. You might get a juror that's a bit savvy with numbers, loves a bit of countdown, so would probably be good on a fraud trial. I don't know. But with this, when you're talking about people who are accused of offences that are quite serious, they might say, well, hang on, if there was a jury here, because I haven't done it, then I think I stand a better chance of having my case heard.
Absolutely.
Whereas 3 old duffers sitting in a room having a chinwag over what they might think doesn't quite sound like justice.
No, it doesn't. And part of the reason for the jury system is it's a cross-section of society, different, people with different economic, racial, whatever backgrounds, and they bring their own different perspectives to it, which in theory should allow you to come up with, hopefully, the right verdict, and you can maybe relate more easily to the person in the dock and to the victims, etc., etc. Whereas judges, just by their very nature, are fairly out of touch, probably not representative of the people in the dock or the victims, and as I say, you start to chip away at the real fundamentals of the criminal justice system. It's
quite funny that the other thing that's happened with, and this is sort of our friend social media, I suppose, the perception of judges, these were probably all kind of, secret Tories with a, nice landowning kind of character, always got a lovely place in the Cotswolds,
and then at the weekend,
nice pad in Cheshire or something, 10,000 acres.
Stay at their club during the week.
But according to social media, they're all mad lefties. How did that happen?
I've honestly got no idea.
How did our judges go from being that to sort of Arthur Scargill with a wig?
I think you're right. You've hit the nail on the head. It's social media, isn't it? People are always looking for some sort of conspiracy. There's some. Well, clearly they think that because they're woke. And if the verdict or the Lucy Corner case you mentioned earlier, that's become a bit of a cause célèbre on the right, hasn't it? Because of the sentence that was handed down. But yeah, you're right. I mean, for long enough, everyone thought about judges. Well, they didn't know who the Rolling Stones were, or
that's right. It was all of that.
They were so out of touch. They were just duffers. Didn't have a clue
music by Mick Jagger.
Yeah, exactly. A popular beat combo, my lord. So they didn't, have a clue about real life. Yeah. There was no suggestion that they were all raving communists.
No, that's bizarre, isn't it?
It's quite an unusual shift.
It's funny, I was having a conversation with 2 police officers just last week about the Lucy Connolly case, and one of them said, which surprised me, somebody must have had a word with the judiciary on this to get 31 months for something that it wouldn't make a courtroom, half an hour ago. Yeah. But the other copper, who was like quite incandescent, they said, "What are you talking about? Seriously? You really think that like a bloke in..." I mean, this happened under David Cameron during the riots in 2011, so it's not a Starmer thing particularly. No. But his name does rhyme with 2-tier. That's quite useful. As I think we said the other day, in the same way that Thatcher's name, Thatcher rhymed with Snatcher, so it was good for the milk story. So maybe there's a bit of that going on. But the other couple was going, no, that wouldn't have happened. They were just jailed because it was against the backdrop of public disorder. That's what happens during that time. A judge doesn't listen to they almost look down on politicians. They don't want to hear from any character. But when you see cases that are quite obviously unusual, it does draw you there a little bit. You do wonder.
It does a little bit, but I mean, I guess at the end of the day, they are human like everyone else, and they may well have. I'm not suggesting for a second, and I don't believe that politicians would have a word in their ear and say, like, you've got to start handing down some exemplary sentences here to send out a message. I think this may be the judges, despite what we just said about them being out of touch, are aware of the social discussion around the riots back then and the riots last summer, and think, right, well, maybe we should be a little bit tougher here. Maybe that's how it came about.
Let's move to this story. Keir Starmer's government sinks to its lowest ever approval rating. They've only been there a year, Kevin.
Yeah, it's been pretty staggering, really. I mean, you've got to remember, he wasn't carried shoulder high on a sedan chair up Downing Street.
Wasn't Blair, was it?
No, it was less than 35% of the vote. Yeah. And just because of where the votes were distributed, he ended up with this almost accidental massive majority, which does not in any way reflect the public enthusiasm that there was. I think people just desperately wanted rid of the Tories. Labour were the best alternative. So in that regard, it's maybe not that surprising, but they've not made it easy for themselves, to put it mildly, by making so many mistakes. Winter fuel obviously being the original sin, and it's never got much better for them since then. And the U-turns haven't helped on various things, and it's been a tough 12 months. And although the next election probably isn't for another 3.5, 4 years, they've really got to get their finger out pretty 100%.
63%, in another poll, 63% of the public believe Starmer does not respect them, which is not a good, it's a horrible thing, the thought that your Prime Minister doesn't respect the people who vote for him. Considering he made great play about, country first, party second, that's going to be a big mantra of his.
Absolutely, yeah. I think people just, for whatever reason, just have never quite taken to him. And someone said, I think it was a pollster said, that people tend to like politicians who seem to be enjoying themselves, who seem to actually enjoy the job. Farage, Boris, these people who maybe have a bit of a laugh, they seem to be comfortable in their own skin. Cameron as well was he was pretty, he wasn't like Boris obviously, but he was relaxed, he looked the part, he acted the part, and he won a couple of elections. Obviously it went bad after the referendum, but Starmer never looks terribly comfortable, does he? I think people pick up on that.
Final one here. Councils. Give councils more powers to raise taxes, according to Angela Rayner. She supports fiscal devolution. This would allow councils and mayors to levy local taxes and manage their own budgets. There's a lot of pressure, obviously, on councils from up high. So they've got X amount of money to play with, but they could be raising their own, other than their council tax.
And you give politicians the opportunity to raise tax and have more money to spend, then they will take it.
100%.
And they've got a lot of things they have to spend it on: social care, police, a lot of the fire, lots of local services, but people I think feel that they've been taxed enough, and it'd be a very brave politician I think that went into an election saying, vote for me and I'll put your taxes up.
That's the problem, isn't it?
That is the problem.
That is the problem. Which is always the problem that the Conservatives have generally had, not on specifically on taxes, but bearing in mind their whole thing is to conserve and retain the status quo. Yeah. It's that their ongoing mantra over the years has been, vote for us, we will do nothing. We will keep everything exactly as it is. Because that's how we like it.
Yeah, well, people don't like chaos, do they? People tend to be a little bit suspicious of revolution, and people... change is a good thing. If you're fed up with the government, change is a powerful message, but people don't want somebody to come in and absolutely rip things. They want things to be calm and measured. Correct. They don't like chaos.
Listen, Kevin, we hit the clock, but thank you, as ever. Kevin Schofield, he is political editor at HuffPost UK. Thank you to him.